Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today for another Lifting the Curtain interview. Today, I'm joined by Wade McCollum. Wade was part of the original London cast for the musical It Happens in Key West. The musical has a live album which was recorded during the run back in 2018. Has just been released through Broadway Records. You can get that album on all streaming platforms right now. Links to everything are down below, and I hope you enjoy this fantastic conversation with Wade.
My name is Wade McCollum, and I'm pretty much a New York actor these days. Although I had the absolute incredible, superlative pleasure of going to the West End and doing It Happened in Key West in London a few years ago now. And I just had the time of my life, and I can't wait to go back. And Key West is based on a true story. A man named Carl Tanzler, who lived back in the 30s in Key West, Florida. And in a nutshell, nutshell is actually a good word for him. Yeah. He was pretty obsessed with finding his soulmate. He had a dream, and a psychic grandmother, I'll put that in quotes, who said, "You have to go find your soulmate." He was born in Germany. And for 40 years, he searched for his soulmate around the whole wide world. He got 12 degrees, supposedly, in medicine and philosophy and art, music, real polymath, and ended up finding this woman from his dream in Key West, Florida in the 30s. And plot twist, she's dying of tuberculosis. So the play is the musical is about, somebody who is sort of fixated on this notion of soulmates, and then sort of asks a bunch of questions about the reality of a soulmate. Does that exist? Does life or love or the soul exist after death? And in terms of death and love and being married, how far does a promise go, and how far is too far in terms of keeping that promise?
Amazing. And obviously I know it's going back to 2018, was it, when you did it, when you opened?
I think so, yeah.
What, if you can remember back then, what kind of attracted you to the show and the role?
That's a great question. So, first and foremost, the creative team, Jill Santoriello, is incredible, and her music is so beautiful. And the book writer, Jason and Jeremiah and Jill, they all have sort of this very quirky sense of humor. Jason especially has almost a John Waters sensibility about him. Yeah. So the material, the creative team really attracted me. And then when I read the material, I'm always attracted to something that's like complex and weird and has like sort of a built-in challenge to make it work. I just find myself attracted to the rigor of a new work that I can kind of chew on. We can experiment. I kind of see myself as a theatrical scientist. So the oddness of the material and what I perceived as almost a punk rock paradoxical combination of golden era sweeping romantic Broadway music with this very bizarre, somewhat morbid tale about death and love, and the mashup of those two things, I just thought, oh, this is a very dynamic, exciting, and potentially very kind of controversial project. So it excited me on lots of different levels.
Yeah, and obviously now I know you're still kind of working on it, because I know I'll ask you that in a bit, but now obviously the album's come out, which I presume you recorded back. Did you record it back then, or was it kind of recorded?
It's live, actually. So it's a live cast album of the West End cast, which was incredible. And I have to say, I missed them. So it was really cool to get the album released. I got to listen to all their voices, and this flood of memories came back, and they're all so talented and so great. I did have some nervousness about a live cast album. I've never done that before, where, you just kind of cross your fingers, I guess. I hope it was a good show.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty darn good, if I do say so myself.
No, I do agree. No, it's superb. But obviously then kind of, it must be odd kind of having that kind of almost resurrection, I suppose, that kind of fits in with the show a little bit, but kind of that kind of almost 4 years later, they kind of post-pandemic, the kind of that visiting the show again? Kind of how's that been for you?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. That's true. It is kind of a resurrection of sorts. And the live album has so much it has a crackling energy that only a live performance can have. You can hear the audience responding, and you can hear us sort of, adapting and going with how the audience was reacting that night. And you can really hear the performative quality of the songs. And for me, in previous cast albums that I've recorded, you're sort of trying to simulate that in the studio. And it's difficult because there's no audience, and you're kind of in a sound booth, maybe by yourself, and you can't really see your scene partner, and you're singing a love song or whatever the song may be. So it's really special, actually, to have this live album where the live performative qualities are captured so excellently. And yeah, it was a beautiful resurrection.
Yeah, and I guess kind of in that kind of time, that kind of allowed you more time to reflect on the show, kind of, as I know you said, you kind of still working on it a little bit, but kind of as you kind of had that time to kind of refocus, and I guess kind of it brings back, like you say, brings back those memories out all these years on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did just do a really great, I'd say it was a workshop in Pennsylvania at the Bristol Theatre, where we sort of reopened the writing process and examined some of the parts that weren't as successful, and so really addressed some of the new parts of the show, and really kind of I'd say that the main thing that happened over the course of that workshop was really bringing Elena to life, the character of Carl's soulmate. She had beautiful music, but in the script she just didn't it felt like she never fully showed up. And now she has this incredible autonomy. She has a lot of agency. She has really keen intelligence, and we find them connecting around science and music and aviation and all of these things that they actually find a co-passion for together while she is alive. So I think some really beautiful work happened in that workshop.
Yeah, and obviously, as it's kind of we touched on, kind of it being like 4 years ago, but do you kind of have any highlights you remember from that time of working in London?
Oh, gosh. I mean, honestly, when I think about it, it just seems like this like theater heaven dream. I really can't believe it happened. We were living in St. John's Wood in this beautiful neighborhood. I would walk through the parks, the few miles down to the West End, passing all of these incredibly devoted theater goers. I mean, I think one thing that sticks out for me is, the British people go to the theater, and I know that sounds silly, but it's not, it doesn't seem like it's that odd or that special. And I don't mean that as a pejorative. It seems like it's just integrated into daily life. People go and see the theater, which is so incredible. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was that. The weather was really beautiful while we were there, which I guess I hear is rare, although I have a hard time believing it because I had my Key West tan on. Yeah. The parks, the gardens, getting out of the show and hanging out with the cast and walking through the West End and seeing all of the theater, goers pouring out of the theaters and talking about the show they just saw. All of those things are just it's just this beautiful montage of theater heaven in London. Yeah.
And obviously you was at the Charing Cross Theatre, which is kind of a nice kind of intimate theatre. Kind of, how was that kind of connecting with the audience on that level?
Yeah, it was kind of the perfect size for where we were at. We really felt connected to the crowd, but it still has sort of a grandiose feeling to it from the stage. So it's you kind of got the best of both worlds, intimacy and also sort of a grandiosity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's obviously it's a kind of an odd theatre because obviously I know you're under the train station, so I've been a couple of times. It's unusual, but you kind of get that quite a bit in London, I suppose. Kind of hearing the rumbles and the trains, and it adds atmosphere, I suppose.
Yeah, that's part of it. It does have that sort of dungeony quality with the rock archways and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm sure they had a real tough time editing out the train sounds when they're mastering the album.
No, they've done a good job to be there. But kind of obviously on the album, do you have kind of favorite tracks on the album that people should listen to? Kind of, I know we should listen to it all, but
I mean, you know, it's odd. I just listened to the whole thing through and I thought, wow, the music does a really good job of telling the whole story. Even without the book to the show, the music really sort of sequentially does sort of add up. Of course, there are some missing pieces, some details. But that was a cool realization. And I really enjoy the harmonies on the, I don't even know what the song is called right now, but when the troubadours are singing, it's got this like Cuban Spanish flair, and the harmonies are so rich and complex. And I don't know what it was about the recording. Those tracks, which sort of thread throughout the entire show, hit me harmonically in a really great way. And then, of course, Undying Love, which is the end of Act 1, is sort of like, I mean, that's just one of the most powerful love songs I've ever encountered. And then I think the 11 o'clock number of If You've Never Felt This Way, which is really Carl defending himself in court, explaining, you know, the gravity of his love and that all he was doing was keeping a promise. It's heartbreaking. It just breaks my heart even hearing it. It's just so, there's something so pure. And yes, he, I think, was very misunderstood. And I think for me, it's a conversation about neurodiversity and promises kept and mental health. Mm-hmm. And does love and life exist after death? Yeah.
And as we kind of already touched on, you've kind of been able to continue working on the show kind of even these years on. How kind of, I know you've kind of mentioned the development like you said already, but kind of how has it been, that journey? Kind of obviously you don't really often get to do that, do you? Kind of do a show and move on kind of thing. But
yeah, I mean, gratefully in my career, I've had the great fortune of being able to work on a lot of new stuff that gets many lives, you know, will over the course of a few years, you know, a lot of work will happen. And then we get, you know, multiple productions, a big New York production. And I really, really love that. To me, that's just sort of, I love the creative process. And I love, like I said, kind of getting in there and, you know, tuning the drum and being sort of a theatrical scientist. So I really enjoy the process. And yeah, it feels like with the pandemic, there was this sort of, you know, necessary almost 2-year pause where nobody really worked on theater much at all. But I do think the writers worked on their own, and I think a lot of good work happened in that way. And then just recently, like I said, this workshop, we were masked in Pennsylvania. We got to sort of hear the new material, and it's working really well. So I know they're working toward a next step in terms of a production. And that is exciting. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, fingers crossed it continues to thrive either over there or coming back to London, hopefully. But kind of, I know this is kind of an obvious answer, but how important do you think that an audience does take a chance seeing a new show like Key West?
I mean, you know, of course, I have the opinion that everybody should be adventurous in their theater going, you know, habits and try new stuff. So, you know, that's sort of my opinion. I understand, though, especially stateside, it feels like it's so expensive a lot of times to see something, especially in New York City, that I think it would be harder to take a chance on something you don't know is going to be excellent or not. So it feels like the stakes are a little higher, whereas if the price point's a little bit more affordable, I think you can be more sort of risk-taking in your theater-going experiences. And I will say that, you know, some of the best things I've seen have been the newest things. You know, I remember seeing In the Heights on Broadway in 2008, I think, right when I moved to New York. And it was before it won the Tony Award. And I would get my, $25 rush ticket, sit in that fourth row center. I think I saw it maybe 7 or 8 times before it won the Tony, just because, there was very few people in the audience. I kept thinking, this is the best thing I've ever seen. But it was, it was a new piece and people didn't quite know how to feel about it yet. And so I always feel like it's a great thing to embrace and to be adventurous and support new work for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, I know we mentioned at the start, but you are in My Fair Lady at the minute. Can you tell people where they can still see the show? Because obviously, I know you're kind of said you're kind of covering, but kind of obviously, where can they still see it? And obviously, chance they may see you doing your one man show.
Yeah, yeah. My Fair Lady, not exactly a new or adventurous piece of work, although Bart Scher's vision is really cool, and he's taken a really new angle of approach in terms of Henry and Eliza's relationship and sort of how it unfolds and where her agency lies. And unpacking that Bernard Shaw play, I was like, wow, because I've now played Henry Higgins quite a few times. I did it a couple of weeks recently, and man, just getting in there, it is such a good play. It's so complex. I know I'm stating the obvious, but wow, I just have such a resurgence of love for the piece. So we're here in Chicago for a couple more weeks. And then the show kind of, I think we go Detroit and then Memphis and then Fayetteville, Arkansas. I think that's about it. Or maybe Des Moines, Iowa. And then the tour here is going to close. But people can see Bart's production in the West End right now, and I say, go, go, go! I would love to come see it if I could hop across the pond.
Yeah, I've heard many a good thing. Friends have already been to see it, so hopefully, because I know it's not Coliseum, which is such a vast theatre compared to some of them, kind of such a big space for it. But fingers crossed, I think it's doing quite well. I don't know how long the run is, but kind of all blurs into one, didn't it, after a while, and shows all do that after a while, and so many runs. But I have some more questions just generally about you. There's 5 questions here. The first one being, what was the first piece of theatre that you can remember seeing in your lifetime?
I think it was a Bernard Shaw play. I think it was Major Barbara. Is that Shaw? Yeah, I think so. It was Major Barbara at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival when I think I might have been 10 or 11. And the Oregon Shakespeare Festival was modeled after the Globe there in London. And yeah, it totally transformed my perception of reality, quite frankly. I thought, oh, people do this for a living.
Yeah. And you may kind of already have answered this saying In the Heights, but do you have a kind of favourite piece of theatre that you've seen in your lifetime that stands out?
Oh my gosh, I'm really bad with superlatives. I have a superlative handicap because I'm like, but they're all the best.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we just saw Othello at the Globe. Well, not just, but while we were in London doing the show, I got to see Othello at the Globe, and I mean, Mark Rylance was Iago. That was bonkers brilliant. I was pretty overwhelmed with the excellence of that production and the performances, and also just the magic of seeing a show in that theater space. It was like, the inheritance of the tradition of the Western theater was, I could feel it. That was pretty amazing. Yeah. Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and just to go in a completely other direction. That's a show I've done, I don't know, 10 or 15 different productions of it around the country. And I've also seen many excellent productions of it. And I just think it has a special sort of radical intelligence to it that feels shamanic and poetic and edgy, although nowadays a little bit less fringe. I think that the gender conversation has advanced quite a bit, and I think that show has a real beauty to it.
Yes, very good choice. It doesn't have to be career based, it could be anything in your life, but what would be one thing on your bucket list?
I want to go see some more of the sacred temples of the world. I've had the great honor of going all through the Yucatan and touring around these incredible Mayan ruins. I've seen many sacred sites in North America, in Peru, Malta, which was absolutely incredible. The Hypogeum in Malta, that sound space, holy mackerel. But I would love to go to Cambodia and Egypt. And, there's so many sacred sites I would love to visit. That's definitely a bucket list for me.
Yes. And if you weren't in theatre and performing, what do you think you'd be doing with your life?
Well, I think actually I'd be a physicist, or a biologist or a chemist. I actually, over the pandemic, co-founded a couple of neuroscience music companies, through my co-founder's work, through Cornell Tech, her postdoctoral research at Columbia and Cornell. And I actually am now in the University of Pennsylvania's neuroscience program. So I'm studying neuroscience, and I didn't grow up in a way that had much access to college. And so theater was sort of this great way for me to make a living very quickly. I didn't graduate high school, and sort of intellectually or with my imagination, I could go as far as I wanted, and nobody could say, stop researching. If I was playing a chemist, I could study chemistry. If I was, playing somebody signing the Declaration of Independence, I could study US history from any angle I wanted. But now I'm really kind of nurturing the sort of quantitative scientific brain that, it's always been there in the background, and I'm having a really great time, and it's actually informing my theater work in a really cool way. So I think science and art are deeply related, and it's fun to nurture both sides.
I would agree on that. It's very exciting. This is a completely random question, but I'm going to throw it at you. If you could have dinner with any three characters that you've played in your life so far, which three would you invite?
Oh my gosh, that's cool. Well, Hamlet.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would have to say Hedwig. Wow. And Ernest Shackleton.
Yeah. That's a good strong dinner to that.
Yeah, Ernest Shackleton, we did that. That's a new work that we did. It's called Ernest Shackleton Loves Me. And man, playing that character, especially through, the vicissitudes of the time we're in, his optimism and strength of spirit and his use of music and poetry to keep people alive just blew my mind. And I really resonate with his spirit. And we would love to take Ernest Shackleton Loves Me to London. I think it would do very well there, seeing as he's a true Englishman and a true hero. So yeah, those three, I think we'd have a good dinner party.
That would be a good dinner, and hopefully that does come over. But this is more of a deep question for you. Simply, what does theatre mean to you?
I mean, theater for me has always been and continues to be a ritual form of communion, of community. And I think for me, I've always just resonated with its power to transform and to bring us together in an empathetic, scenario. And I think group entrainment, from a brain and heart perspective, when we entrain together through music and through story, and we, catharsis, I think it's a really powerful modality for transforming our brains and hearts and becoming more, more of a community and more unified. And I think it's a template for exploring hard things, drama and such, that maybe in our own lives we won't ever live in the Antarctic for 3 years surviving on the ice. That might not be something that each of us do, but Ernest Shackleton did. Mm-hmm. By watching his story and seeing what he did in order to survive and to keep all 28 men alive while he was floating around on the ice in a terrible situation. we might actually, through mirror neurons and the empathy of our hearts, be able to adopt some of the tools that he discovered and used for our own lives as we navigate some of the difficult terrain that we all encounter as our lives unfold.
Brilliant. And my final question for you today is simply, why should anyone out there be checking out the Key West album?
Oh, wow. I think just simply it's a gorgeous piece of composition. The music is absolutely gorgeous. And the story, like we've said, is really bizarre and adventurous and challenges a bunch of notions. And I think that, at a very base level, there are some songs on there that if you extract them out of the story that they're couched within, the songs on their own are just absolutely phenomenal, beautiful compositions. And so I think, that alone, the power of the music is enough to sort of, check it out.
Brilliant. Well, that wraps it up brilliantly. Thank you for your time today. The album is out there through Broadway Records on all the streaming platforms, everywhere music is basically these days, isn't it? Basically. Yeah. Thank you for your time. I hope My Fair Lady continues to go well, and hopefully you'll be back in London for too long, maybe with this show or with the Shackleton one.